Welcome to Troubleshooting Innovation, a commercial baking podcast, sponsored by Puratos, providing commercial baking solutions for your high-speed production lines. I'm your host, Joanie Spencer, Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Baking. This season, I'm speaking to Jennifer Steiner Pool, President and Creator-in-Chief of Steiner's Baking Company, about how to turn a special family recipe into a commercially viable brand. In this episode, we're going from startup to scale and learn how Steiner's has grown its customer base and how production is growing with it. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for coming back to join me again this week.
So excited. It's going to be great.
So we had such a fun conversation last week in just learning about the Steiner family and how the brand started and just your relationship with your mom. It's a cool story. And so we're going to talk about scale and going from startup to scale. But one thing that I want to talk about first is sort of your background, because I've heard this story before, marketer turned baker. Your background in marketing and advertising is relatively common, and it's really useful when you're an entrepreneur and building a bakery brand. So can you just walk me through a little bit of your background, since you got into it for a totally different reason? I mean, in a short and relatively crass way, you did it to piss your mom off.
Facts are facts.
But what was it? Like, tell me about your marketing and advertising background and where your areas of expertise are and how you took that and dove into this.
So I have always been obsessed with marketing and advertising. When I was young, I used to go to the bank and take all of the creative assets, like, the brochures and the deposit slips and stuff, and I would take them home and organize them in my room. That's what I used to do. Like, I've always been obsessed with marketing and advertising. And that has been my career. I was the Kellogg's Pop-Tarts girl in college, and I gave out Zilla's Awesome Salsa to hundreds of people in grassroots events. And I've had some great experiences in marketing. I had my own company in Denver for a while, and I'm just obsessed with consumer behavior. How do consumers interact with brands and products, and why do some work and why do some fail? What motivates a consumer? It's just fascinating. If you ever want to people watch, which we were discussing, go to the grocery store. Watch how people sort of investigate the products that are around them. It's really fascinating. So I have this passion. As we discussed in the last episode, I quit my job. My mom is furious. And I know immediately that we have to get samples out into the market. Now, to do that was very tricky because we had a proprietary flour blend, right? It's not as if we were just taking a recipe. I could go to the grocery store, get all the ingredients we needed, and here you go. We had to have the flour. That was a no-go item on the list. So as I was doing all of the basics, creating the website, as you and I discussed, I had the brand locked down. I was registering the company name, and I knew how to do all of these things because this is my professional background. What I didn't know how to do was bake. So it's just a small issue. So we put that aside, and I said, okay, I've got to get the flour. How am I going to figure this out? And I just went on to the Googles, the interwebs, and I researched blenders. What does that really mean? How do you find one? Wait, ours has to be gluten-free. It can't just be any blender. All of these, food safety, our flour is certified kosher. So now, this funnel is getting narrower and narrower as I'm trying to vet out and find someone to blend the flour, which I do keep secret. And so we find this group. It's such great people, as I've mentioned before. So now we send the flour to them, our little bowl of flour, and we send them the recipe. Now they have to replicate it. Here's my first lesson, right? How are we going to scale this? Jennifer went to the grocery store and bought a bunch of ingredients, and Nancy figured out how to sift them in a bowl is not the same as 5,000 pounds of flour tumbling in a giant cauldron. And, so just imagine the difference. These guys are fabulous partners. We had to go through a lot of iterations to make it work. And there are, what I will always say about any successful food product, there's 3 legs to the stool. The recipe, not all recipes are alike. People think they are, but they're not. Sometimes the reason why your food doesn't taste good is nothing. It's not you. It's the recipe. Number two is the methodology. You could have a great recipe, but if you're not baking it at the right temperature or the right time or mixing it correctly in the right order, it's not going to be good. Therefore, it kind of is you and the recipe is good. And then the third is the ingredients. Ingredients matter. And this is my second lesson that we learned the hard way. And we'll come back to that. Don't let me forget. So we find this blender. We go through this whole process. We finally get the flour right. But now I, as the marketer, and apparently someone who has to now learn how to bake, we have to get enough product out to find out if it's scalable. Can I make hundreds of coffee cakes? Not the same thing to make one as it is to make hundreds.
And hundreds that are every single one tastes the same.
Every single one has to be perfect. And then thousands, right? And then tens of that. Like that's where my head is. And I want to go there very quickly because I don't actually want to bake, but I'm going to have to. So the entire time my mind is, I don't want to bake. I don't want to bake. If we're going to make this work, I have to get out of the kitchen. That's all I can think about. Before I've even gotten in the kitchen, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of it. So that's why I was so hell-bent on finding scale. So I'm making hundreds of coffee cakes. Now, I happen to live in a place where you are not allowed to bake at home. I live in Nassau County, New York. You cannot sell food products made from your home. So that is now an immediate problem. Now you can make marketing samples and, go to your school's bake sale or what have you. But the minute you want to slap your business license on it and be out there selling it, that is forbidden.
Right.
So now I have to find a place to bake, and remember, it's gluten-free.
So you can't just go to your neighborhood commercial kitchen and knock on the door and ask for some space.
Yes, I live in a place where there are no neighborhood commercial kitchens. So I mean, what was it going to do? So we get the flour. Now I have the flour. I'm baking hundreds of coffee cakes in my mom's kitchen. Hundreds. I mean, they're all over the kitchen. I mean, hundreds. I can't explain to you how many coffee cakes I pumped out of my mom's kitchen. And I'm wrapping them by hand and I'm taking them to farmers markets and I'm sampling them everywhere. And remember, I'm miserable because I don't like baking. She's already telling me she's two more products she wants me to start making because now she's realized she doesn't have to bake because she made me bake. So I'm like, just pump the brakes, sweetie. Just slow down.
It's a good thing you're good at, you're skilled at ignoring your mother.
I am really good at it. And unfortunately, my son has inherited the same thing. So I realize we also happen to live in a place that's a little bit of a bubble. When you're trying to pressure test a new product in the market, and this is my marketing background, right? A baker wouldn't necessarily know this. There are certain zip codes in certain areas of the country that aren't really going to tell you the truth and reveal the reality of the viability of your product. And before I could go to scale, I really had to have a good sense of price point and palate. Is this a New York thing or will coffee cake resonate across the continental United States? I didn't know, right? I really didn't know because there are brands out there that you would argue have been around for a very long time and they have coffee cake. Now I would argue it's not actually cake. It's some sort of other conflagration of I don't know what, but not the same thing. So the only way I could really figure out how to get the product out to a more objective test market was Amazon. It was the only way. So now we're in May 2016. I've quit my job. By October, I have the flour. It's packaged and ready for resale, which also pissed off my mom. That was like her biggest hurdle was she'll never get the flour made. So now she's just grumbling over in the corner. Now I have to figure out if we can ship these coffee cakes after they're made. Like what is going to happen to this coffee cake? I'm going to make these coffee cakes. They're adorable. They're kind of fragile and they have to have a shelf life. I mean, what are we going to do? We don't want to waste any food. We don't want to throw things out. So we start freezing them. What do I know? I'm like, just put it in the freezer. What could go wrong? We're freezing the coffee cakes. Now, the other thing you have to know as a marketer, I know this, consumers, especially my mother, are very susceptible to the power of suggestion. I have so many stories that I'll share with you in another episode. It's just unbelievable. And my mother is very guilty of this. So because I know this about her, I never told her when I was baking something and feeding it to her or freezing it, nuking it and feeding it to her. Her rule was, if I don't like it, you can't sell it. Like, that's what she always says to me. I'm like, but you have dry mouth and all these issues, and you're so picky. You're not like a normal person. How can I use you as you can't be the taste tester. But I would do that. And I would always lie to her, and I'd mix them up, and I'd label things with Post-it notes, A, B, C. Like, if you use a red Post-it note, she'll tell you she doesn't like it. She's just a marketer's, in some ways, dream, because you know exactly how to manipulate her in terms of packaging and signage and language. So anyway, I'm making all these coffee cakes. I've got to figure out how to ship them all across the country because Nassau County is not the place to test this. So I figure out we can freeze them. Now, this is a whole nother big epiphany for me and the baking industry, and we can discuss that at another time. So I set myself up on Amazon. Now, it's not easy to set up a business on Amazon, and I'm jamming this through in like an hour. I'm like, I have to do this right now, and I have to start shipping coffee cakes immediately. And as you're setting your business up on Amazon, you have to have like all this paperwork because it's food. Every time I come to a different part of the process, onboarding process in Amazon, they want this document. Well, crap, I don't have this document. Okay, I have to go over here. I have to get this document, register this thing, right? Bring it back. So I'm just doing it real time. I'm going through the thing. No one works for me. I don't have, legions of people. It's just Jen. So I'm getting this all together. And then I finally launch it. We push it out on Amazon. My brother's like, you're out of your mind. We need insurance, like everything. Just imagine the list of things, right? That I'm like, okay.
I was wondering, like, how bad was your brother, the attorney, freaking out?
He's just running behind me. He's like, Jen, you need insurance. Okay, I'll go get that. So I have this philosophy professionally that no just means you have to start selling or you have to start doing. No doesn't actually mean no. This is how I approach my professional career. Okay, my brother and mother don't share that particular sentiment. To them, no is no. So every time I run into no, or that can't be done, or nobody does that, nobody freezes baked goods. How can you freeze this? I said, well, you just ate it and you licked the plate. Like, apparently it's not a problem. I don't know why people don't freeze their baked goods. They should. It would save a lot of food waste in the world if everyone just froze this stuff. And then I come to find out that there's a lot of baked goods out in the world. I love this. I have a friend who's howls laughs when I talk about this. It's the same thing with sushi. The stuff is frozen. Like, people think their bluefin tuna that they're eating in Kansas is fresh. Like, that's not possible, guys. It was frozen. It came to you frozen. They defrosted it and gave it to you fresh, but it was frozen. So, I guess unless you're Warren Buffett and you brought it in from a point of origin, it's frozen.
Right.
I've quickly learned that I had to lean into that being a positive, which it is, because we have a zero food waste policy. So we freeze our baked goods and then we sell them. Nobody has ever had a Steiner's coffee cake that was made and sold to them, within the hour. And I did that from the get-go because I didn't want to have to fight some sort of palate differential down the road. I didn't want to have consumers who were getting it fresh out of the oven and then other consumers who were reheating it and have some perception issue there. So the product is always frozen, fresh frozen, right out of the oven into the freezer. Now we have the flour. Now we're on Amazon. Now people are buying coffee cakes on Amazon and I'm shipping them all over the country. And suddenly I get very nervous and I pump the brakes and I put the Amazon inventory down to zero. So now we're in March of 2017.
Holy smokes. Hold on. So your mom perfected the flour in 2016. And by 2017, the Amazon business is growing too fast. You're manufacturing the flour. That's fast.
It makes me nervous. I'm very nervous. I had to know. There was no way I couldn't justify a business plan or really look at how we were going to package and scale if I didn't know for sure that consumers liked the product. We had to know. Amazon is a great way to do that. Now we're really selling coffee cakes and I better be able to make them. So it does turn out that there is a commercial baking facility in Glen Cove, which is 4 blocks from where I live. And I happen to know who owns it. So I strike up a deal and I say, listen, you don't use the facility on this day, right? Can I come in and use it? I'm going to clean it. I have to do the whole thing for food safety reasons, et cetera. And he wants a tenant. I mean, it's just look. And he says, yes. We start manufacturing there, but it's just Jen. I am making every single thing by myself. So I'll go back to lesson number 2, which I mentioned earlier. So what happens is we're baking, and the ingredients are critical. We don't use any additives, no imitation flavors, no natural flavors, just the real deal. How you would bake in your home is how we bake. And the ingredients you would use in your home are the ingredients we use. And we're very, very proud of that. So since Jen's not a baker, Jen doesn't know that all ingredients aren't created equally. I had no idea. So I'm going along, and sour cream is a very important ingredient in a German sour cream coffee cake. So we're going along, and suddenly I'm getting feedback on Amazon that the cakes are dry. Now, for gluten-free products, that is the death knell. For someone to write and tell me a cake was dry, I literally would burst into tears. I'm like, it can't be dry. How is this possible? And I'm like at my wit's end. So then, since Jen doesn't ever accept no, and in my mind, if someone doesn't like the product, that's kind of like no, right? I say, okay, I have to deconstruct this. It can't be that some of the cakes are fabulous and some of the cakes are dry, right? Because now I'm thinking scale. If I can't consistently make the product, if every other cake, someone thinks it's dry, we have a major problem. Unlike my mom, I take notes. So I'm looking through all of my notes. And I'm like, this is interesting. The one ingredient that I'm not consistently buying the same brand is the sour cream. So I go home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to bake 2 cakes. And I look at the sour cream, and lo and behold, to all you home bakers out there, some sour creams have additives in them and some don't. So what was happening was the cakes that I was using, what I'll call sour cream B, which is not the one I should be using, were dry because there were all these additives and preservatives that, first of all, we didn't want that in our product. But secondly, they weren't playing nicely with the gluten-free flour. Turns out that pure sour cream, which of course we should use anyway, is great. It's got the right fat content. There's nothing in it but sour cream, and this was a huge learning for me. And my mom, actually, I had no idea. And this rolls forward into our chocolate fudge brownies. All chocolate is not equal. So that was a major learning. So remember, I don't know anything about baking, but I'm running this company and selling these cakes and making these products. And I have to learn about these things on the fly. And that was a huge win for us. Once I figured that out, the cakes were beautiful.
Wow. And so then you got a wholesale customer shortly after that, right?
Yeah. So then we had our first retail location in April 17. So now I had a nice dynamic going on. I could do demos and be in front of customers in a retail environment and watch and see how they chose and why they chose our product. And we were testing on Amazon across the country and getting feedback about price point and palette and shipping and, how was the product holding up? And I was also testing sizes. We had many more sizes because that's part of price point. When we launched the company, we had 3 sizes. We now have 1 size. So all of that was happening at the same time. I mean, it was just a lot, right? I'm just handling it all myself. And then Nancy absolutely wanted the chocolate fudge brownies. It was a full-on fight. And so I said, Mom.
She's still hung up on the brownies. Wouldn't let it go.
She's not letting it go. And I'm like, Mom, we're not even in this a year. I still don't have packaging for the coffee cakes. And now you want to start in with the brownies? And she's like, yes, I want them.
You created a monster.
She's a monster. So
sorry, Nancy. We love you, Nancy. This episode is sponsored by Puratos. Bake your best every time with Puratos, the trusted partner for commercial bakers. Puratos' R&D and technical teams push the boundaries of innovation to help you achieve consistency at scale. From enzymatic solutions to fillings, Puratos products are more than ingredients. They're the key to high quality at high speeds, batch after batch. Puratos commercial baking solutions. Innovation for this run and every run after. Visit puratos.us, that's PURATOS.us, to learn more.
So first of all, so we start experimenting with the brownies, right? Again, I don't know anything about baking. It turns out that all dark chocolate is not created equal. We use 100% cacao chocolate, which we're very proud of. When we strayed from that unknowingly, the recipe, it just wouldn't taste as good, right? It just was not as good. And so I finally figured that out. And this one happens to be my grandmother's recipe. And she called them on her recipe card, Bossy's Unusual Brownies, but they are chocolate fudge brownies. They're phenomenal, crunchy on top and fudgy in the middle. My mom, of course, is a taste tester. And the way that you make them is after you bake them, you have to flash freeze them immediately. And that's how you get the contrast of the textures, which is part of what makes them so awesome. So now I'm thinking, how am I going to I have to bake these brownies and get them in the freezer en masse. Remember, it's not one little 6-inch by 12-inch pan of brownies that you would make at home. We're talking about sheets of brownies. So
right.
I'm making all the brownies myself. I'm rolling racks into freezers, then taking them out and hand cutting them all. I really want to kill my mother at this point. I'm just like, you have sent me, and now people want the brownies, right? So salesmanship 101, you want this? I'll make it. Like, you're never going to turn away an order. So now it's the summer. Now I've got brownies and coffee cakes that I'm making all by myself. And now I'm at a farmer's market. We have retail location and we're selling products on Amazon. And it's just Jen. And we're selling the flour on Amazon, but that's less work, obviously. This is all unfolding very quickly. And now I'm in this commercial kitchen, which of course means food safety is locked down and perfect, which I love. However, I can't take full advantage of the capacity available to me in this setting because it's just Jen.
Right.
So the third lesson I will say, and I like to say, a person shouldn't have regrets in life. A person can make mistakes and learn from them, but don't regret it. Like, that's kind of sad because then that starts to stack up on your shoulders, and that's a tough way to go about life.
I agree.
So I would say, in my carefree, risk-taking, no does not mean no perspective on life, the mistake I made was not driving harder to book working capital at the front.
Mm.
So as we're going along through this process, we're using all the money from sales. It's going right back into the company. I mean, to this day, I still don't earn a salary or personally get paid. And I'm not pulling working capital into the company. And given that my brother and mother are risk averse, we are not accruing any debt. And to this day, aside from some family-friendly debt, we don't have any debt. We don't have any credit cards. We don't have any serviceable debt. So that helps me in some ways slow down because I just don't have money to spend. It also hurts because I can't invest where we're succeeding. I can't invest against it, right? I have to just do this slow roll. So that would be, I'd say, we learn that ingredients matter, right? We learn that we need to take notes. And then we learn that we really should have pulled in more working capital at the front. That continues to be my biggest struggle is working capital. So now we're on our way to scale. So where I start to get worried is if I pull in part-time employees, how am I going to pay them? And I have a methodology for how I look at cost of goods sold and how I manage the gross profit margin for each cake sold, right? And that's how I manage my budget. So I say to myself, okay, 20 cents of each cake sold or whatever it is, right? And add all that up and I know what I can spend. And since I know I don't have any waste aside from marketing, because the best marketing tool we have is the cakes themselves and doing demo days, then that's how I factor my budget to figure out if I can bring on part-time help. So it's not just Jen in the kitchen, so we can leverage the capacity we have available to make more product, to sell more product. It's a cycle. That's how we start the journey to scale. I mean, and it's pretty quick.
Shocking, honestly, how fast. And I would say, just in my opinion, I would attribute that to the flour. You had to make that flour at scale if you were going to start this company. So you were kind of forced into it really quickly as it was. So in the profile that Annie wrote for the Commercial Baking Printed magazine last year, she identified 3 things that you said you had to do in order to grow the business. Scale, we talked about that, replicate consistently, and make the product defensible. Can you talk to me about what does that mean? What do you mean by make it defensible?
So in marketing and advertising, we talk a lot about a defensible position, a differentiator that you can really hold on to and drive against in your messaging and the growth of your business. And for us, that was the quality of the baked goods tied back to the flour. We knew, and still to this day, know that the flour makes our products superior. The taste profile, whether we're making chocolate fudge brownies, ginger snaps, now 3 flavors of coffee cakes. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where someone doesn't say to me, I had no idea this was gluten-free. That to me, along with the clean ingredient list that we have, makes our company defensible. Now, a more positive way of saying that is we are on the offense, right? We have positioned ourselves to push forward. And I often say there's a great bread company out there right now who's really doing some great work with gluten-free bread, Char, which many people are familiar with. I admire them and I look to them as a peer, if you will, in terms of having created a position for themselves and they're holding it, right? That's where we want to be. And that comes down to the 3 things I spoke about earlier: recipe, methodology, and ingredients. And the ingredients for us are key. That is where our defensive position, or offensive position, if you like, sits.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, I want to ask about something you mentioned last episode, and that was getting the attention of Mondelez International and their Snack Futures collab program. And I've seen a lot of action happening around these incubator programs. We actually wrote about it in the magazine a couple months ago. What was your experience with Mondelez like? And how did it help you grow?
I can't say enough about the team at Mondelez International Snack Futures. It was an extraordinary opportunity that we were very, very lucky to have. And the first thing that they said to us when we got to the kickoff day was, "You are here because of your flour." That is why.
Amazing.
So, but of course, my mom burst into tears. So I can't say enough about them. So again, since I come from a more of a professional setting, I knew as an entrepreneur what I was hungry for that I didn't have on my bench from a management perspective. I had 12 weeks, and to be honest with you, still today, because I can call them anytime for anything that I need. For those 12 weeks, though, I had an entire team of seasoned professionals working with me by my side in every aspect of my business, from new baking pans that we needed and trying to figure out how to source them and where to go, which took them 15 seconds. It would have taken me, okay, maybe only an hour because I like the Googles, but still, it's much different when you can call up a person and they can help you engineer and architect the solution because they actually know what they're doing versus just Jen, who isn't a baker. The resources and the financial modeling, which I'm always keenly aware of, is critical to the ongoing success of the business. The breadth of expertise is just extraordinary. They will end up influencing our new packaging once I raised the capital to run it. We got to work with a company called CellCheck. And as you know, because we've discussed this, I'm obsessed with consumer behavior, and they really helped rein me in, which is also important as an entrepreneur. You need to be willing to hear from others, right? We talked about this before. What you don't want to have is founderitis. It is the death of any company is the founder who thinks only they know what's right. Now, as a founder, you have to know where to dig in, where you're holding on to what the essence of your company is versus I may not really know this particular subject area. I need to collaborate and hear what other people have to say.
Mm-hmm.
So while I love marketing and I love consumer behavior, I'm not a designer. I'm not a graphic designer. Our logo, which I love, and people have told me they love it, I never could have done that. I inspired it. I knew what I wanted it to feel like, but I couldn't have made it. And so the resource like CellCheck that Mondelez brought to the table, it was able to say to me, and I was able to hear, Jen, here are the problems with the packaging. You got to roll this back. This needs to be more prevalent. You've got to redo your photography, all these things. I mean, the resources are phenomenal. And the people, like my mom couldn't stop talking about how nice everyone was. And we got to work with people from all over the world. I can answer more specific questions about it, but it really impacted the entire business, every aspect of the company. And, I only applied. I was talking to a potential investor and we were talking about resources for capital. And he said, you really need to get in an incubator program. So immediately I start Googling that. And, there's like 10 for food specifically. And we were so small. And I said, they're never going to take us. He's like, you never know unless you apply, right? So no doesn't mean no. No means start selling. I applied. And Jackie, who's fantastic. So, there's, as you can imagine, there's interviews and they're reviewing the books and, they're really vetting you. Jackie emails me. She says, Jen, we have to set up this last interview. We have a few more questions to go through. Great. No problem. So it's a little nerve wracking. And so I get on the Zoom and surprise, we're picking you. She tells me, she ambushes me. And she's like, Jen, we're recording this. I was like, okay. But it was so exciting. My mom burst into tears, couldn't believe it. It was really an extraordinary experience, really fabulous.
So do you think, I think I'm going to sort of start to wrap up this episode with this question. Do you think you would have gotten to that program if you hadn't been able to scale as quickly as you did? And then how did this program sort of help ride the momentum that you had created? Because was it 3 years from the time you started, 4 years from the time you started to the time you went into the program?
5, right? Because we started May 2016.
5. Okay.
May 2023 was
23.
The pandemic in the middle of that. So there's no way they would have taken us if we didn't have a product that was replicable and in market. Absolutely not. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have felt comfortable being a part of the program if we weren't at the stage we were at, because how could I leverage any of it? If you're going to go through an incubator program, you have to be prepared to leverage what you're going to learn. So there's 2 issues. One, if you go into it thinking you know everything already, then don't waste their time, because there's plenty of companies who want to learn from them. So if you're going to have that attitude and all you want is the check at the end of the thing, don't do that. And then you have to, so to be ready to leverage everything you're going to learn, you have to be in market. I mean, you have to be moving. So there was no way we would have been accepted, nor would I have applied if we weren't already at scale and already in a co-man relationship, which we can also talk about at some point. That was critical. So what I was able to do was very quickly, and again, when you're small, you're nimble. I was getting feedback on some particular strategic decisions I'd made that changed my course. So when we originally launched the company, I know this is something you might want to speak about later, we did not tell anyone the products were gluten-free, because that was my litmus test for success. Consumers are susceptible to suggestion. So since all of the products in the marketplace taste not good, we didn't want to be up against that. I didn't want to have to sell over the idea that we were gluten-free. I wanted to sell despite the fact that we were gluten-free. And you'll look at our packaging and people would say, where does it say it's gluten-free? I don't believe you that it's gluten-free. I said, well, the badge is on the back, because we've always been certified by the gluten intolerance group. But I had the badge was like teeny tiny on the back of the boxes. One of the first things that they really gave me a hard time about when I got into the program was that I wasn't leaning into it. Again, you have to be open to hearing stuff. And I had my whole rationale for why. And they said the frozen and fresh baked good market, I think, is something like 35 billion in the US. It's humongous is the point. The gluten-free baked good business is 900 million. Okay. So much smaller. So they're looking at me saying, Jen, which part of the pond do you want to play in? Now, the other thing that's important for a business is you have to solve a problem. If you're going to be successful, I don't care what you're doing, McDonald's, convenience, Volvo, safety, you have to solve a problem to be successful in your sector. We solve a problem for people who are gluten-free. They are sick and tired of eating stuff that tastes like crap or is full of crap to make it taste somewhat good. And we needed to lean into that and stop being afraid of it and stop worrying that other people wouldn't buy the products because they say gluten-free. If the products are good enough, which they are, people will love them. They will tell other people. 97% of purchases are made from word of mouth. If people are saying, don't touch my brownies, those are mine, and are coveting them, and kids are at the lunch table and they can share their food because they're not embarrassed of it, the brand will grow from there. So that was a huge learning right out of the gate, is that I needed to walk away from that strategy and lean into gluten-free. And I started doing that like the next day. I was on social media. I changed our email language. Anything that I could do immediately to change that perspective, I did. Another thing that was really interesting, when we originally started the company, and the legal name of the company is Steiner's Coffee Cake of New York. I did that because I felt as a new company with very little capital, I needed the product to really sell us. I needed everyone to know immediately what we made and why they were buying it. New York, old school, diner nostalgia, coffee cake. There could be no gap between that understanding. And my brother, interesting, because doesn't have this background. He's like, I don't know, it feels too narrow, but we'll go with it for now. I said, listen, we'll go with it for now. We can always change it. But I have no anchor. I have no marketing budget. So I've got to leverage the name of the company so that people know what we're selling. So now you roll forward, I get to Mondelez, ginger snaps, flour, coffee cake, stuff in the pipeline. And they're like, you can't keep with this name. And, I'm like, what? I know I have it in the marketing plan in a couple of years. They're like, no, you have to change it now.
And that makes sense.
It's totally rational, right? But when you're in it, you can't see it.
Right. And that's really just one of the pitfalls of starting a new brand or starting a new company, and you have no crystal ball. I mean, why isn't there a counter where everyone who starts a new company can walk up and say, I'd like my crystal ball now, please?
Exactly. It's, it would save me a lot of time. So I'm still very close with the person who created the logo for us. So I called him up literally, we get out of the session. I call him up. I'm like, we got to change the logo immediately. He's like, what? Because I love our logo. Everyone loves the logo. I said, I think we can hold on to the corporate identity visual, but we have to change the name of the company. So in this smile underneath, you now see Baking Co. instead of Coffee Cake of New York. And that gives us room to breathe. And Mondelez was very proud of us. I mean, we're moving. They're giving us information and we're putting it to work. We haven't even left Chicago and we're already putting it into.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And listen, that's great for them too. Like one of the reasons why the teams come together and it's a coveted position to be able to work on the Snack Futures team is because they get to work with small companies, which isn't an experience they have in a corporate. I mean, Mondelez is humongous, right? So to work with a company where we can just, oh, you think I should change that? It's strategically on point. Okay, I'll do it. Like that would take them probably a year to pull that off,
Right.
So
right.
That's also what we gave to them is that ability to experience what it's like to be in a startup. And I think they really value that as a team.
I'm sure they do. Okay, Jennifer, that really is going to wrap up this week. Another incredible conversation. It's not just your story. I love your energy. You're so fun to talk to.
I mean, I make cake for a living, It's pretty fun.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so we kind of dipped our toe in the gluten-free conversation. And so the next 2 weeks, we're really going to focus on that. First, we're going to talk about the challenges that come with producing a gluten-free product from an operational and production standpoint. And then we'll get into revisit the marketing side of it. So I can't wait to talk to you about gluten-free production next week. Thanks again for this week.
You bet. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Troubleshooting Innovation. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Puratos. To learn more about commercial baking solutions, visit puratos.us. That's puratos.us. Troubleshooting Innovation is an award-winning podcast from Commercial Baking. It's hosted by Joanie Spencer, Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Baking, produced by Jordan Winter, Creative Director for Avant Food Media. To learn more, visit commercialbaking.com.